Everybody, this is the one and only So Says Jay. You might have seen it. We've been going through the first little opening bits of your video just so people can get kind of acclimated and familiarized with your thesis and kind of your point of view. But why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and we can chat about it.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much. And, it's a bit late, but congratulations on the new addition to your family.
Oh,
Very
thank
happy
you.
to be here. My name is Jay, and I have this channel. I've had it for almost a year now, but I've been active on it for about half a year. And mostly I make Assassin's Creed content. I move away from that sometimes, but generally what I've done is I've been talking about Assassin's Creed in different capacities because that's one of the franchises that I grew up with. I find it easy to talk about, and I really enjoy talking about it. And so that's how we got led to, all the videos you see here and to the video we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I got to hand it to you with such a young channel, especially. I mean, you're pumping out some very good stuff. It's always blowing my mind when I'm like, this video is crazy, crazy good and very elaborate and everything. And this guy is like relatively new to the space. So I love seeing up and comers like yourself come in and start to put out some really good content that I think is intelligent and thought provoking all at the same time. I mean, it's just very refreshing because I'm sure you've seen some of the content that gets popular nowadays that's just like, dare I say, brain dead. So it's refreshing to see your stuff that's the total opposite of that.
Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discourse about Assassin's Creed, especially right now. Um, it's just, it can get very toxic because there's so many things people want that, Ubisoft isn't very good at providing, really on both ends of whatever spectrum you're looking at. So it's interesting to talk about because it's kind of a simple series. It's easy to discuss. There aren't really deep set themes that you have to dig into, but at the same time, there's so much that has been going on to get us where we are today. And so I appreciate you having me here, especially because, like you said, I am a small channel and you are a big channel. And so it's very kind of you to have me on here. Even if at some point I get put on blast today, we'll have to see.
Well, we'll see. We'll all behave, I'm sure. Like I was telling everybody in chat, I expect that we largely agree on a lot of stuff. I think it's probably going to come down to definitions and terms and things as these things
Hmm.
usually do. But I mean,
Yeah.
the video, the titular video that we are going to be kind of focusing on is the one that you put up on Assassin's Creed Unity. So for people out there that have not seen the video or just want to spark notes, how would you kind of sum up your thesis of that video and kind of what you were trying to say with it?
Yeah. Well, I think what I was going for here is I think there's a lot of value in talking about these games from a macro level, right? Especially because they're all coming out so close together, at least they were before. So you can tell how one game leads into the next, or which game got more funding than another, or more effort than another. But when you look at something like Assassin's Creed Unity, at the same time, I think it's also worthwhile to say, you know, this was a good Assassin's Creed game, but did it do the things that we wanted it to do well, or did it just do the things that we wanted it to do? Right? And so right now it does honestly, very honestly, represent so much that Assassin's Creed fans, or a lot of Assassin's Creed fans, I can't speak for anybody, but a lot of Assassin's Creed fans really do want, and really do want to have return. But I just have this hope when I look at this that we could do better than what they gave us there because there is so much of the content that they have in Unity that feels like a first step. And on the one hand, you can think about it in terms of the step they didn't take after, because it really is a shame that there are certain things here that they just gave up on, whether they be the free running or the social stealth or anything else like that. And then the other hand, which is you really could have taken a bigger step than this, if you were going to do this. And I don't blame any individual developer for that. I blame Ubisoft as a whole, but even then, I can't pretend that I was, working with them at the time. I can just see that the product is half baked in a lot of ways, and you have some things that are ambitious but not quite functional, like the free running, and then you have things that just make me think, did you really even get a second look at that? Like the story, like the side content, and things like that. And so, a lot of the discussion around Assassin's Creed Unity is the discussion of what might have been. And so in making this video, I wanted to talk about what is the product they actually gave us.
Yeah. And I think that's all makes sense to me. I agree that Unity is fascinating in a lot of ways because when it launched, of course, it was the subject of widespread ridicule, and deservedly so. I mean, it was
Yeah, that it was.
a travesty of of a release, and I think it came at a time where everybody was starting to get frustrated by games that felt rushed. And then it was also a time where people felt like there weren't enough games taking advantage of next gen hardware. So they were going to come in and be like, no, this is a next gen open world game. It's everything you've ever wanted. And then it was just a disaster. And so for years and years and years, it was the poster child for like you mentioned, corporate greed, for rushed releases, for executives that are just trying to milk their fan bases dry by rushing out products that aren't ready. And then something kind of switched. And I think you said in your video, it was kind of right around Odyssey. I saw it really start to uptick around AC Valhalla, or as we like to call it, Valaha. And I think like it was people have gone back to it and look at it more fondly now because, for one, a lot of the bugs have been patched. It still doesn't run well. It still has terrible pop in and stuff like that, but at the very least it's playable, certainly. But it got popular coming off of AC Valhalla because that game is so antithetical to everything that I think most people would agree makes Assassin's Creed. Or for some people, it might be AC Odyssey is that game, which is so antithetical to it. So I think it was just people were like, this is not it, fam. And they started looking through the catalog and being like, where can I get that fix? And
Yeah.
for I think a few more nuanced reasons, they didn't find it in Syndicate. Syndicate is interesting to me, kind of as a separate topic that we can eventually talk about, because it seems
Yeah,
to be
maybe.
often forgotten for whatever reason. But Unity is, to me, the last time that Ubisoft was really ambitious while trying to make an Assassin's Creed game in its purest form, trying to make something based on stealth, on social stealth, on parkour, on a really compelling historical setting. And while they certainly missed the mark in a lot of ways, I think the reason why it's recaptured a lot of people's attention is because they look back at it and they can see that it was ambitious, that they were trying to do a handful of things that were really novel, not just for the time, but even for today. And while they failed to reach those goals, I would say probably because of executives rushing it, I think people can see what it could have been, and that potential is what they're attaching to, not necessarily the game as it is, if you were to play it today.
I think that is exactly that. This is very much an aspirational game. And you can look online, you see stuff by Leo K, by Jacers, by Swifty Unknown, by all these different people who do such cool stuff in this game. And it's not like they're liars. It's not like they're trying to show you something that's not real. You can do that stuff in the game. And like I say in the video, you can't do that stuff in any other game. And so it does become an issue of not only is this something that was ambitious, but it was ambitious in a way that no other game ever has been. And so that's where both the, I think, excitement for it comes out, but also some of my own displeasure for it, because I look at this and I think, wow, there are so many different ways this could have gone. But for right now, this really is the best we have. This is the pinnacle of what we've got here. And, there are a lot of different ways that I wished it could have moved forward. And even if you look at a lot of the creators who make content based exclusively on the parkour, like Leo K or like Jacers, people who can talk about it much better than I can, there are reasons that people are just so attuned to what they did with Unity. But at the same time, there's so much of it that you can't overlook, even if you really like the game, that it just becomes frustrating trying to even consider what they might have done next after what they did before that. And a lot of people, you had talked about Valhalla, a lot of people see it as a black and white issue these days. Are you a fan of the old games or are you a fan of the new games? And I mean, you might see there, my other most popular video is the Valhalla one, which is where I talk about how Assassin's Creed Valhalla is my least favorite game in the series. And in that video, I talk about how I really like Odyssey. And Odyssey is kind of middle of the pack for me. It's not my favorite, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of it because I thought at the end of the day, it was a very good game. And there were even things that I liked about it from an Assassin's Creed perspective, not just an open world RPG perspective, that I liked better than some of the other Assassin's Creed games. And so being able to engage with it that way was something I liked. But I see a lot of the same issues in Unity that I see in, Valhalla or Valaha, as I see in the chat now. Um, and I think it is worth considering how they kind of hamstring themselves in the same ways with both, even though they are such different experiences.
Yeah. Now it is fascinating. I mean, there's so many moving parts to the Assassin's Creed franchise nowadays, as we've seen with just countless iterations, thousands and thousands of developers working on these projects, with executives that probably don't play video games deciding where the franchise is going next. And so, the discussion over Valhalla versus the old games is fascinating in its own right. But in many ways, I think it was inevitable, because you look at Assassin's Creed 3, which is usually the one I point to, where that's also another game that was extremely ambitious and really failed, honestly, to achieve a lot of what it was trying to do. They had that whole system where you can get these ships and then you can tie those together with like trade routes that they were doing a really kind of rudimentary thing with. And of course they had this idea for you to be able to run through the open world expanse of the American forests out to the east, and it's all segmented by loading screens and none of it works together super well. But at the time it was pretty solid. I mean, especially the snow deformation. I remember seeing that and being blown away. But when you look at something like Origins, you can see how we got to Origins from AC3. Like all of the stuff that they established there eventually fed into what would become the most recent trilogy of games. And especially, and I did a video on this, the Tyranny of King Washington DLC, which a lot of the developers from that would go on to work on Odyssey, Origins, and Valhalla. And that franchise, or that DLC, had a ton of supernatural abilities, like actually changing your form and fighting as a wolf, like all sorts of stupid stuff. And so I think the warning signs had been there for a while. It just took a while for Ubisoft to catch up. But I mean, to get back to all of this, you've obviously put a lot of thought into Unity and the franchise as a whole. If you were looking at something like the next Mirage, I know we kind of know what Mirage is now. It's more of a smaller project that is probably not going to be too transformational or anything. But if you were the director on an Assassin's Creed project, what do you think that Ubisoft should focus on, and how would you go about making the next true to form Assassin's Creed game that takes what Unity did and all these other games did and cranks it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first off, I certainly have an answer for that question. But at the same time, it's kind of dangerous to get into it without thinking too hard, because then you once again are in the aspirational side of things, because you look at Unity and so much of it is fantastic at a conceptual level. And if the only thing you needed to make a great game was good ideas, then it would be YouTube comments and Redditors who won Game of the Year every year. But then you actually have to make the game, right? And so that can be kind of a difficult way to conceptualize. How do you come up with an idea for the game that you want without having the experience of having ever developed a game before? But at the same time, as a consumer, I think it is important to be able to say what you want and how you want it. And like I said, I enjoyed Origins and Odyssey a lot. I really had a lot of fun. Odyssey got me through the pandemic, to be honest. But at the same time, like a lot of people do say, or Origins more so, is able to make the games more playable, more accessible, by making them less ambitious, by making them less unique. And so what I look at when I see the old games, and this isn't just Unity, I like the other games better, but there is a lot of potential that never got met in the older games too. I see things like social stealth. You have things like that in a game like Hitman, but nothing where you can, hide in the crowd, run into the crowd, and be completely invisible. Social stealth that had a lot of directions it could have gone. The free running system that had a lot of directions it could have gone. And the combat, which changed so much that I don't even know if we really have a firm identity for the combat in Assassin's Creed. It was always paired animations for a long time, but they kept changing things up in different ways that made it feel different. And so when I think about what I want out of the combat, I don't even know what that would be. Just to very directly answer your question and not run around it anymore, when it comes to what I would want out of an Assassin's Creed game, I think most certainly I would want a city that is urban and tall and lets you traverse it. I think there is value in having settings that divert from that sometimes. But I think it's been long enough that I would very much want a big open city where every building has multiple other buildings that you can get to in different ways. When it comes to the free running system, I do talk about in the video how good parkour up and down is because, I really love the ability to control when you're going up and control when you're going down. And when you look at videos from people like Jacers, who I keep mentioning, they'll talk about how there are ways that you can brute force different descent options in all the older games as well, and a bit in the newer games. But they were never as clear cut as in Unity. And so while I dislike the automation systems, while I dislike the way that the world was built in terms of not actually being optimized for Arno's free running animations, I think that making sure that you maintain that up and down directionality is something that I would find very important for a free running system. In terms of just the world in general, I would want content that feels like it fits in both an Assassin's Creed game and in that world itself. I talked for a bit in this video about why I really enjoyed the worlds of AC4 and AC Syndicate, which came out right before and after. And there's so much that you can do to engage with that world, whether it be as a pirate or as an assassin or as someone who is freeing child laborers or as someone who's trying to chase down a Templar on a carriage. There's so much that you can only do in those games because they are unique to their settings. And so I think that is a real benefit that Assassin's Creed has by being an anthology like that, is they can do whatever they want with these settings. So a setting that is deep and specific to itself, that is enjoyable to traverse in a more traditional way, and that has these black box missions. I would love to see those come back because as someone who loves Hitman and loves Dishonored, I thought on the one hand, the Unity black box missions were a little lacking compared to a game where that is kind of the whole focus. It's just black box missions in a game like Dishonored. But at the same time, in Dishonored or Hitman, it's not like you can, jump to the top of a roof and do a flip, right? So it has its own unique niche still that has never really been explored. So the ability to go back to all those old things in a way that is just more functional. And like I said, I'm not a game developer, so I can't tell you exactly what more functional means. But, I'd feel it with a controller in my hand, right?
Oh, yeah. No, and I got to ask you, like, one of the things with Unity that I actually initially thought sucked, and then I played it years later and was actually really impressed with, is the co-op. Now, like, 2014 was the age of every game going co-op, and every single player game was going to get multiplayer and have all these modes. Even games like, I think, like Black Flag 3, like a lot of those games had multiplayer modes as well. And they all sucked. But Unity's co-op is actually pretty decent. Even today, you can play it, and you can go through these missions together with up to 3 friends, and it definitely doesn't live up to its potential. Like, there aren't a lot of archetypes, for example, so there's no way to have one of your friends that like specializes in or uses like a blow dart as their weapon, and then another person is really good at lock picking, and so you go together and you work together with different skills and things to complement each other. But it has really gotten me thinking whether that is viable or sturdy enough for future releases. And we know they're working on some multiplayer Assassin's Creed games, and they have some stuff in the works to try and go back to this. But the abandonment of the co-op and multiplayer side of things, I actually look back now and I think that was kind of a bummer, because I thought it showed a lot of potential in Unity and it was just totally abandoned, which some people might disagree with. Some people might look at that and say, no, it's good that they walked away from co-op so they could focus on the single player stuff. But I think that the co-op actually had a ton of potential. So I'm wondering what your thoughts on the co-op in Unity are. Do you think that something like co-op is something you'd like to see in future releases? Do you think that's viable, or is that just a distraction and something they shouldn't bother with?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that the co-op in Assassin's Creed Unity could have been a lot better. I think the game is much less stable in co-op, and I don't think they do a very good job of balancing the enemy types in the co-op.
Mm-hmm.
But I honestly think that any game that can have co-op should. I love it when games include co-op options. Again, it's an issue of, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? Things didn't work that good in this game, and so we never see them again. I think co-op is just another one of those things. We have completely different systems now, so I have no idea what co-op would even look like in new games. I don't even know what the mission structure is going to look like in the games after Mirage and what we can expect from that afterwards. But if we can have co-op, I think that being able to explore these open worlds with a friend is something that people love doing basically in any game. People love doing that in Watch Dogs, and I can't really say that co-op in Watch Dogs was especially interesting at all. It's just the fact that you can have someone there, period, is a really cool thing. Um, so I think open world games especially lend themselves well to a co-op experience when they're able to make them work.
Yeah. No, and I think Elden Ring is a great example of that. Like, phenomenal single
Mhm.
player game, but also going through boss fights with one of your buddies is awesome. Like, I had so much fun doing that. But with I mean, I think you said something that reminded me of something I talked about in a video I did a while back on Unity. And that is that Ubisoft really looked at Unity and said, okay, this didn't do well. Everything we did in that, we're going to abandon. We're going to walk away from. And so, like, oh, we had a really elaborate free running system. Well, the game didn't sell well, so we need to abandon that. And oh, the lighting system was really groundbreaking for the time. Well, the game didn't sell well, so we're abandoning that. We'll walk it back. And so there were all of these things that they did for the first time or in a more elaborate or impressive way than they had done before in Unity. But because Unity was a failure for, I would argue, reasons of polish and rush,
Mhm.
we lost all of it. They really did throw the baby out with the bathwater. And just now they're kind of reevaluating and going, well, wait, maybe we should like reevaluate some of those ideas we had back in the day. And I think it's in many ways Ubisoft's get out of jail free card. There, Yang Ya just posted a video on this, I think last night, where he was saying that, looking at some articles, he found that Ubisoft in a lot of ways is putting all of their other franchises on the sideline and are basically going to be the multi-billion-dollar Assassin's Creed factory, and they're just going to start pumping those
Mhm.
out as their main goal, which maybe is good. Maybe it's something really frustrating, and maybe we'll get super burnt out on these games. We'll see. But I totally agree. Like, it's really heartbreaking that they dismissed all of these other systems that had a lot of potential in their first form here that never got the chance to see the light of day or get refined further simply because this one wasn't received well. I can only imagine what the lighting system, for example, would have looked like if it had been refined for one or two more releases through that PS4, Xbox One generation. Like, I can only imagine. It would have been crazy.
Yeah. And I think one of the harsh things about Unity is everything, like I say in the video at the beginning, everything seems to come with a caveat, right? The lighting is fantastic. I mean, the only other game that has made me feel like that immersed just from a lighting system alone was probably MGS5, which came out just a little bit after. But even then, those are both older games, and it's just such a fantastic lighting system. But it's also a baked-in lighting system, right? And that's not an inherently bad thing one way or another, but it looks like you know, if at any point they were trying to make a day-night cycle, they gave up because they thought, you know what, we've got something good with this lighting system here. Let's not mess with it. Um, and then, you look at the free running system. I was just watching this content that we have up here, and it's like, wow, every single one of those animations looked so good. Did any of those animations look like it actually fit the distance that Arno was trying to jump, though? Right? Those look like jumps that were supposed to be for a jump half that distance, but
Mm-hmm.
they just stretch it out because it doesn't feel like they actually spaced these things for the animations. And the old games, they were very clunky and they didn't always work that well. Um, but at the same time, if you saw something in front of you and you jumped to it, they came up with an animation for it, which is an incredibly complex thing. I remember the first time that I played Assassin's Creed 1, the thing that really sold me, even though that game is so simple not even from just a gameplay perspective, but just in terms of giving you stuff to do, was you get thrown out of that room by Robert de Saab, and then you're faced with this wall with a bunch of handholds on it. And it just hit me. I can make Altair grab any of these handholds. I just came from Prince of Persia. You grab the things they say you can grab. Now I can grab anything. This is incredible, right? So just the jump from being so linear to just having basic options felt exponential. And I feel like the world of Assassin's Creed Unity is exponentially more complex. But the problem is, I don't think that the free running system is exponentially more complex. It's more complex, but it's not complex enough for the what they were able to do with this world. And I think there was just a disconnect between those designing the world and those designing the parkour itself. And unfortunately, they never fully got there.
Yeah, I agree. It's why I think the first video I did on Unity that popped off was I just titled it like Assassin's Creed Unity is heartbreaking, because there's just a
Yeah.
lot of things here that, given more time, given more love, and certainly iterations, could have really been something truly special. And it would have been a totally different universe if Unity had somehow been polished and then done surprisingly well, nominated for Game of the Year, and then they focused the next trilogy on that stuff. Because Origins, as you probably know, Ashraf Ismail, the game director for that, he said that part of their inspiration, their main inspiration actually, for that new trilogy, for what they were doing with Origins, was The Witcher 3. And they decided that game was
hmm
super beloved. We're going to do that with an Assassin's Creed Code of Pain. And in many ways, they did a pretty good job of it as the years went by. But that's why the whole meme of it's a great game, but a terrible Assassin's Creed title was born, because it doesn't achieve or hold true to the identity of the Assassin's Creed franchise, because frankly, that's just not what they were too concerned with doing. Um,
hmm
which is frustrating as somebody that likes these older games. But I mean, here's maybe the main question at the core of all of this, which has been brought up a handful of times, I know, in my comment section, so I'm sure you've seen it too. Are we just past the age of these Assassin's Creed games? Like, you go back and you play AC Unity even, and the mission structure, the combat, all of these things feel markedly outdated compared to the contemporary titles that are releasing nowadays. And part of that's because we've moved away from paired animation combat systems. Now everything is like a third person adventure melee combat game. So that's part of it. But are we just past the point where these kind of classical Assassin's Creed games are viable to do millions and millions and millions of copies? Or do people still want it and they just haven't gotten it?
Well, I don't have a lot of faith in Ubisoft going back to, things that we really want to see. There are great people working in any company out there, no matter how, greedy it is. You're going to find people who have a love for their art, and sometimes that will shine through. But in terms of what the overarching company is going to give us, I don't know. But it does lead you to that difficult question of what is a classical Assassin's Creed game. Because another thing that I've always struggled with is I've always felt like the games that they've been telling us they were giving us in trailers have never really been the games that we've gotten, right? I mean, if you look at Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 2 is my favorite game in this series to this day. And sometimes I wonder, is that nostalgia? But I go back and I say to myself, you know what? A lot of this doesn't hold up. And for one reason or another, I think everything else holds up less. So it just gets to remain my favorite in the series. But do you remember how many of your targets, of your main like sequence ending targets, end in a stealth assassination in AC2?
How many end in a stealth assassin?
Like how many of your main targets do you actually assassinate stealthily?
Um,
I'm
I
not putting you on the spot. I just expected you not to know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I of course remember, the moments where you leap from. I remember one I was on like a rooftop and I leapt at this guy that was walking up a staircase, and I like clipped into the staircase to get lined up for the finisher. But yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. So in Assassin's Creed 2, you have this set of assassination targets, and people tend to remember it as this game where you go to each area and then you gather clues and then you kill the guy. But the first target that you kill in Florence, Umberto Alberti, and the first target that you kill in Venice, Emilio Barbarigo, those are really technically the only targets that you actually assassinate stealthily in the main story. The rest are either chases, like the Middle de Pazzi and Carlo Grimaldi, full-on mercenary battles where Ezio just full-on leads an army of people to take down the target instead of bothering to find a stealthy way in, like with Vieri de Pazzi and Silvio Barbarigo, or they're just scripted sequences, like Jacopo dies in a cutscene and Marco dies because they need to show you how the gun works. So you're left with two out of this huge, long at the time. At the time, 12 hours for a story, that was a long game. Can't say that anymore, but at the time it really felt like a pretty meaty narrative. And only two of those targets are actually people that you kill stealthily. In Brotherhood, you get 3 out of the 4. You don't stealth assassinate Cesare, but all of his followers you can in one way or another. But then you go to Revelations, and the only person that you assassinate stealthily is Tarek, who ends up being on your side anyway. So you don't actually kill any Templars stealthily at all. So, you gather up Ezio, who is the pinnacle of what an assassin is to so many people, and you see, okay, you stealth assassinated 3 people in your narrative over the course of all this. And yet what comes to mind when I think about you is I think about you driving a tank. I think about, getting a 50 kill streak in the Brotherhood combat simulator there. There's all these things that I remember that don't have anything to do with what people say is traditionally Assassin's Creed, but what defined it so much. And part of that is just because it's not what they were doing, but also I don't always know if they really understood what they were going for there, because the marketing has always been so different from what we actually got. And I look at that and I keep thinking, as developers, were you trying to make like a Hitman Dishonored type game, or was this just supposed to be an open world action adventure? Because that's kind of feeling like what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the other things you brought up that kind of got my gears turning, I feel like people generally are feeling very frustrated with what I guess could be whittled down to a lack of consistency and in some ways like respect for maybe the setting or the narratives themselves. Because one of the things about the original Assassin's Creed games that I really appreciated is that while they're not like the most hardcore serious games, at least they take themselves seriously and they set it in these settings, and the characters are holding true to it, and they don't mix in a bunch of like supernatural crap. Of course, there's the Isu storyline, but within the gameplay itself, it's relatively grounded. And like killing people is, there's a constant pop up. It was a meme for a long time. If you kill another person, you're going to be desynchronized. Don't do that. And then it resets. And nowadays, it's just all of that's gone. Like, do whatever you want. Yeah, sink an entire ship, steal that guy's whatever. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And it's one of the things I found most surprising about Valhalla coming off of Origins, because even in Origins, if I remember right, Bayek can like commandeer boats and stuff, but he specifically says, I can't talk. I'm a magi. And then he has to give it back. He doesn't kick the guy off the boat. He lets him hop back in once he's done with it. And that at least was taking Bayek's role relatively seriously. They weren't trying to just act so cavalier with it. But you just don't see this sort of serious approach to the story anymore. And I think that that's no shocker that now players don't take it as seriously, don't respect the characters as much, because the developers and writers seemingly don't take it as seriously or respect the characters as much, because it's just all so surface level. And I just find that so frustrating, because I agree, AC2 for me is like the best the series has well, maybe not the best it's ever been. I love AC2. I just hold it very, very dearly. And it might also be nostalgic bias, because that was also one of the first games that I ever played all the way through, and I just loved it dearly. But it just feels like there's a handful of things where there's compounding issues that make it so AC just can't ever get back on the same footing. But I mean, maybe that brings us to the topic of Mirage. Mirage is being pitched as sort of a return to basics, a return to form. And What are your thoughts on it from what you've seen? Does Mirage look like the kind of game that you're more interested in, or do you have like what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Well, also shout out to JJ Webb in your chat here, just hyping me up with a lot of the things I say. Very kind of them. But when it comes to Mirage, there are two directions I come from it as. I come at it from the just personal mind that I have, what I'm looking for in a game, and as I said, I like Odyssey. For these games haven't been declining for me. Sorry, for me, these games haven't been declining. They've been a roller coaster. There is some good ones, some bad ones, and for me, I think Ubisoft, in terms of my trust in them, that has declined. But the series itself, it goes up and down all the time. But when it comes to what we can expect from Mirage, I think I could definitely have a lot of fun with it. I think that in terms of building a traditional stealth system that is functional, even having the the detection system work and not break on you, to me would make it more playable stealth wise than Valhalla and Unity, even though those two have very different stealth systems. And so, being able to look at some of their dev diaries and see that they have these vision cones set up, they have different detection distances that are going to be very clear cut. That has me excited for the playability of that. Um, I don't know what to expect from the combat. I don't really know what they're going to go with there in terms of what they're going to take from Valhalla and what they're going to try to do new. And then in terms of the free running, it's going to be what appears to be Valhalla, but with better mission design. And so, in terms of what I personally feel about it, I look at it and I think, hey, this could be a cool game. It is definitely not going to be a game that changes everything. It's not going to be a game that make people go, okay, they've returned to their roots. They understand us now. It's not going to be that. But I think I can have a lot of fun with it. When it comes to being more critical and thinking of it in terms of an Assassin's Creed fan base, is in terms of what I see in comments, because everybody has different opinions on these different things. Um, I sometimes wonder how much people actually want complexity and how much people want things that look complex, right? So Assassin's Creed Unity has a pretty messed up traversal system sometimes. You tell it to do one thing, it'll do something completely different to an extent that I haven't really seen in any other game ever. But at the same time, there's a lot of different things that you can do, a lot of different directions you can go, a lot of different options that you have. And it's looking like for Mirage, what they're doing is they're utilizing the same very simple setup that they had in Valhalla, but they're going to give you more pathways that they set up for you. So there are actually going to be parkour pathways, which is something that has been missing in Origins, but definitely in Odyssey and Valhalla. So you're not necessarily going to be doing anything different from holding X and forward. It's going to look different. It's going to look a lot cooler. And sometimes I wonder if that really is enough for a lot of fans, because sometimes I see the comments and people are happy about that. Some people aren't, people who make long videos. But it's easy to get stuck in that discussion as someone who has been playing these games for so long, who gets so into them, who's so interesting, who gets so interested, sorry, in these games, and wants to like pick them apart. But a lot of people, even since Assassin's Creed 1, they would press the trigger, they would press the face button, and they would press forward, and they would automatically go through everything, and it would look good, and they didn't have to do anything on their own. And then later on, people like Jason okay, which is a catchphrase at this point, found things that you can do outside of that and became so interesting. And there was all this stuff that built its own niche of people who dedicated themselves just to this movement system because there was nothing else like it. But how much is that just a niche? How much is that something that people are actually looking for? Are people really just content if there is more stealth, but not necessarily better stealth sometimes, and more free running? Not necessarily more complex free running, just more visually interesting free running. I think I'm going to enjoy the game. I think that as long as they don't botch it, I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. But in terms of where it stands in the series as a whole, I can't imagine it really pushing things forward a ton.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think probably the biggest asset for Mirage right now is that like everybody I know, even like hardcore AC fans, are like, oh, I'm expecting it to be kind of just like a DLC. And when expectations are low, it is very easy to surpass them and to leave with a more positive impression than otherwise is possible. So I think that they're actually set up really, really nicely to surprise a lot of people. My understanding after, speaking to some people, and of course all the other stuff. Just full transparency for everybody in chat. I always try to disclose it because I've been to preview events before, and then I don't want people to think I'm speaking with knowledge that's not public. I've not been to any preview events. I don't know anything anybody else doesn't know. Like I'm coming at this with all the information everybody else has. But from my understanding, it's like you said, going to be AC Valhalla in a tighter shell in a pretty dense city that they've built out with specific areas for you to traverse and missions crafted in ways that they expect you to use maybe 2 or 3 different pathways. You're right. Somebody said in chat, let's see, RS Nos just saw on Twitter/X, oh yeah, it's X now, that according to IGN, AC Dev says Mirage will take 25 to 30 hours to beat. Yeah, that's what I had heard. And it's funny that nowadays, like, a game being shorter is a selling point, because that's so antithetical to everything that would have been established over the last like 10-15 years, where everybody thought, well, bigger means more bang for your buck. But in reality, a lot of people nowadays just want a leaner, higher quality game to play instead of something bigger and more mediocre. So I'm excited for it. I'm really intrigued. I haven't been this. I really do think the word is intrigued. Like, I'm not expecting too much. I'm not hyped. I'd say I'm excited, but more than anything, I'm just wanting to know how this looks and how it works out. Because they've taken some time off, and usually when Ubisoft takes a good amount of time off, it's because they're working on some pretty big things. So while Mirage isn't that big thing, it means that Mirage is the first step towards getting those other big projects like Red, and then Jade has that playtest in just a few days. So there's all sorts of stuff coming.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I look at Mirage, my primary concern right now is what I identify as a lack of confidence from the team there. There's a lot of stuff that they're not showing us fully. I feel like we got a good idea of what to expect from this game, but we don't know what stealth segments would really look like long term. We don't really know what the combat looks like. Coming after a game like Final Fantasy 16, I'm going through that right now. There's a lot of problems with that game, and a lot of the problems with that game were identifiable before it came out. They wanted to show you this game. They wanted you to know everything that was going to be in Final Fantasy 16 before it released. Similar with Zelda when that came out. Those are obviously big games, and they were obviously confident about those games because they knew they were going to rake in some money. But at the same time, I look at these videos that they have put out for Assassin's Creed Mirage, and I find myself thinking, hey, this filter thing is cool, but like, what are the interiors going to look like? What are the stealth pathways going to look like? Combat, is it just you parry and kill, but you're saying that it's going to be more difficult? I'd like to see that, right? And for one reason or another, we're getting closer and they're not showing us this stuff, and it makes me wonder how they're feeling about it behind the scenes. Obviously, there's no way for me to know, no way for anybody but them to know. But I would have preferred if they were a little more forward with what they were giving us and a little more confident in the product they're making, because I'm sure they've been working hard on it.
Yeah. Well, I've been very, I've tried to be as fair about it as I can, because of course we really want to know all the details. We're cautiously optimistic, but we want to make sure that this game is not going to be butchered, like you said, and they're being a little more coy with it. I thought it was really weird that this game was rumored to be releasing in March, and like this past March, and Ubisoft announced it late last year and then doesn't show anything. No gameplay. They release a couple of wallpaper stills, and they're just super coy with it until eventually they show off gameplay, of course, during the summer show that they did. But it's been strange. Like, they definitely are trying something a little bit different than their normal marketing approach. They're doing the dev diaries and stuff. My understanding is that they're probably going to have press do some gameplay demos this fall once we get a little closer. And so we'll probably start to see more in like a month, I would imagine. But as of right now, I think you're right. They're just taking a different approach. And maybe it's because the game's shorter, so they're like, hey, let's not show everything we've got. We've got something awesome, and we're just not going to spoil it. Or maybe it's that there's something wrong, and they're choosing not to show it. I'm not sure, but either way, it makes me want to keep a very close eye on it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way I can predict how good the game's going to be. But if I looking at it right now, I feel like it's going to be a middle of the pack game for me. I feel like there are some corners that they're probably going to cut, and there are some things that it's probably going to give us that we haven't had in a long time. So I'm happy to see where it goes. But even though I obviously talk about things as critically as I can or as in depth as I can when I make a video, oftentimes I go into the experience of playing a game with the hope of just having fun with it, right? This isn't my job. It's just something that I do on the side, and it's a lot of fun doing it, to be honest. And I do it because I really enjoy these games. I've played Unity 5 times, and I think it's one of the worst games in this series. I don't, I don't play it out of spite. I don't play it to stick it to anybody in particular. I play it because look at Paris. Look how fun that is. Look how cool that looks. Look at the experience that you're getting, even if it doesn't come together in a way that I would like. So, I have a lot of fun with it, and um, I play it and I think, hey, this isn't very good. You could have worked a lot harder on that, or you could have really put a lot more time into that. But it's still such a unique experience and worth playing, and I feel that about pretty much every AC game, and I have up to this point. So I am looking forward to Mirage, most definitely.
Yeah. And I think, it's a good point to kind of settle on. I think that this is something that's kind of been lost in the last few years, just in the gaming industry as a whole. It seems like there's a lower and lower tolerance for okay or pretty good games. And I think that's silly. A game can launch and be a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10, certainly an 8 out of 10, and still be worth your time and enjoyable. The question is just the price that you get into and whether you wait for sale to get it. But I've had a lot of fun playing some games that I would probably rate at like a 7 out of 10 level. And with a lot of these games like, maybe Unity or maybe some clunk with Assassin's Creed 3 or whatever you're looking at, you can still have a good time and still appreciate the game, even if it's not, going to win any crazy awards or anything. And yeah, I think what you also said about why you're making these videos, like you probably get a little bit of AdSense that helps and is certainly nice to have, but you're making these videos as a labor of love. I mean, I don't think people understand how much work goes into an hour and a half long video like you've been putting out consistently. It's, this isn't something you do just to like throw a fit or for some quick clout. Like you're analyzing these games because you're passionate about them and you're interested in them. And I think, that's something we should all appreciate, because I think you, like I said, you make very thought-provoking content, and that's something that I think we need a little bit more of. Less reactionary, like super knee-jerk, follow whatever is trending on Reddit type videos, and more videos that make you pause and reevaluate your positions. So mad props to you for everything that you've been doing. I you're one of those creators I'm definitely going to be keeping a very close eye on, and I'm probably going to be reaching out for some collabs here in the future, especially once we start getting more Assassin's Creed stuff to talk about.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate that. There's a lot to talk about, right, in Assassin's Creed and outside of it. And so I always look forward to going online and seeing takes from other people. Especially with Unity, it was always interesting because you would find a lot of the same takes, whether the title was "We Deserve Better Than Assassin's Creed Unity" or "Assassin's Creed Unity is the most underrated game of all time." You end up finding the same points being hashed out anyways, both positive and negative. It was always kind of interesting seeing the places that we both, or not we both, but that people would land on, but just have a completely different opinion about. And so I think it is interesting being part of that conversation, being able to discuss it with people like you, which, as I said, is an honor to do. And I just can't wait for more opportunities to do that. I can't wait for them to put out more information and to put out more products, and just for video games in general, to give me more stuff to talk about, because when I have the time and I'm able to set that time aside to do it, because like you said, I probably collected 20 to 30 hours of footage to make an hour and a half video. It's something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah. Well, and you keep putting videos like that out, and you're only going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And who knows, maybe one day this will be your full-time job. You never know. Unless you're like a brain surgeon. I don't know what you do for your your day job, but you never know. You never know.
Never know. Yeah. And we'll just have to see how it all goes. But people have been very kind. I expected to put out this video and have people just like tear me apart. And everybody in the comments was just having civil discussion, which was kind of shocking. I was happy about that. I guess it turns out that if you want to have a civil discussion and you present yourself that way, then people will at least try to do that in the comments. And then if it's something a little more inflammatory for your title, people are going to come in a little angrier.
Yeah. Well, and also one of the perks, and this is a little cheat for anybody wanting to get into YouTube, when you make a long video that's like an hour plus long, people like that sort of serves as almost like a little bit of a gatekeeping thing, where people who want to just come in and have a very reactionary take, where they just come in and be like, no, you're wrong, AC Unity is amazing, shut up, and then leave, they're not likely to come into those videos that are an hour plus long, because they're like, I don't know if I want to try to even get into that. So they usually will check out and just not bother with it. Whereas if you make like a 15-minute video, they'll come in and they'll they come out in full force. So if you're going to make your argument, definitely take your time, make the argument as comprehensively as you can. And the types of people that will engage with an hour-long video are the ones that are going to critically evaluate it, give you a chance, because they're giving you an hour and a half of their time up front. So you can have some really interesting discussions. I've always been blown away at how thoughtful some YouTube comments can be, where it's just like, somebody sat down and spent 45 minutes writing this out. Jesus Christ. Like, it blows my mind so consistently. But yeah, no, absolutely. Any closing thoughts, anything before we wrap up that people should know? Any plugs, anything you got going on?
Well, I have very little going on, to be honest. But looking at the clock, I'm just amazed at how quickly 51 minutes can go by. I came in here pretty nervous because, like I had said to you before, I hadn't done anything on stream. I think my voice cracked a couple times. But right now, I think it felt like a pretty clean conversation, even though there is so much to talk about. In terms of content that we discussed that was related to my video, I think we got through the first 10 minutes or so. So 50 minutes really isn't a long time, huh?
I know, right? It's crazy how time flies when you're having fun. And like I said, I've really enjoyed this. So as long as you're up for it, I'm sure we will be having you back on and we'll talk again soon. And if you're available, maybe we'll even have you on the podcast with Joel Raptor. And once we get some stuff to talk about.
I had a whole bit that I totally forgot about, where I was going to say how this whole channel was just my elaborate scheme to meet the Joe Raptor team.
Well, I can make that happen. So once we get some stuff to talk about. Now. Yeah, exactly. We got the connections. We can do that.
Yeah, well.
But yeah.
Thank you so very much for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've got your channel linked and pinned in chat. So everybody go send Jay some love. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk again very soon.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And thank you, everybody in chat. You were very nice to me, too. Thank you.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. He took my thing. Red flag.